The Count of Saint Germain, Chapter 1. The Count of Saint Germain, whose real name and origins remain unknown, was a European adventurer who had interest and achievements in science, alchemy, philosophy, and the arts. He rose to prominence in the European high society of the 18th century due to his works and interests. He associated himself with some of the top contemporary figures of the time, including Casanova, Voltaire, and Mozart. The Count used a variety of names and titles, including the Marquis of Montferrat, Count Bellamori, Knight Schoning, Count Weldon, Count Soltov, Manuel Dori, Graf Zorgi, and Prince Raguz. He appears to have been known under the title of Count of Saint Germain during the early 1740s. He is said to have made far-fetched claims, such as being 500 years old, leading to Voltaire to dub him the Wandering Man, and that he is a man who does not die and knows everything. Charles, the Prince of Hesse-Kassel, is recorded of having called him one of the greatest philosophers who ever lived. The Count's birth and background remain obscure. Nothing is known with certainty of his origins. Towards the end of his life, he claimed to be the son of Francis II, Rákóczi, the Prince of Transylvania. While without hard evidence, this would account for his wealth and evidence of fine education. The will of Francis II mentions Leopold George, his eldest son, who was believed to have died at the age of 4. It has been speculated that his identity was falsified to protect against the persecution from the Habsburgs. At the time of his arrival in Schleswig in 1779, he told Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel that he was 88 years old, making his year of birth 1691, when Francis II was 15 years old. Saint Germain was supposedly educated in Italy by Gain Gaston, the Grand Duke of Tuscany, and allegedly his mother's brother-in-law. He was believed to be a student at the University of Siena. Throughout his adult life, he deliberately concealed his actual name and origins, using a multitude of names in different places that he visited. The Marquis de Creguy declared that Saint Germain was the Palestine Jew, Simon Wolf, by name, and was born at Strasbourg about the close of the 17th or the beginning of the 18th century. Others insist that he was a Spanish Jesuit named Emir, and others again intimidate that his true title was the Marquis de Bedmar, and that he was a native to Portugal. The most plausible theory, however, makes him the natural son of an Italian princess and fixes his birth at San Germano in Suave around the year of 1710. His parent father being one Rotondo, a tax collector of that district. Chapter 2, England. According to David Hunter, the Count contributed some of the songs to La Incostanza da Lusa, an opera performed at the Haymaker Theatre in London on all but one of the Saturdays from 9 February to 20 April 1745. Later, in a letter of December of the same year, Horace Walpole mentions Count Saint Germain as being arrested in London on suspicion of espionage. This was during the Jacobite Rebellion of 1745, but was released without charge. Quote, the other day they seized an odd man who goes by the name of Count Saint Germain. He has been here these 2 years and will not tell who he is or whence he comes from, but professes that he does not go by his right name. Secondly, that he never had any dealings with any woman, nay, nor with any succeedum, another word for woman. He sings, plays on the violin wonderfully, composes. He is mad and not very sensible. He's called an Italian, a Spaniard, a Pole, somebody who married a great fortune in Mexico and ran away with her jewels to Constantinople, a priest, a fiddler, and a vast nobleman. The Prince of Wales has had an unsatisfied curiosity about him, but in vain. However, nothing has been made out against him. He is released, and what conceives me is that he is not a gentleman. He stays here and talks of his being taken up for a spy. The Count gave 2 private musical performances in London in April and May of 1749. On one such occasion, Lady Jemina York described how she was, quote, very much entertained by him, or at him, the whole time. I mean the oddness of his manner, which is impossible not to laugh at. Otherwise, you know he is very sensible and well bred in conversation. She continued, quote, he is an odd creature, and the more I see him, the more curious I am to know something about him. He is everything with everybody. He talks ingenuously with Mr. Ray, philosophy with Lord Willoughby, and is a gallant with Miss York, Miss Carpenter, and all the young ladies. But the character and the philosopher is what he seems to pretend to be, and to be a good deal conceited. The others are put on to comply with les manneries du monde, but you are to suppose his real characteristics, and I cannot but fancy he is a great pretender in all kinds of science, as well as that he really has acquired an uncommon share in some. Walpole reports that Saint Germain, quote, spoke Italian and French with the greatest of elegancy, though it was evident that neither was his language. He understood Polish and soon learned to understand English and talked it a little, but Spanish and Portuguese seemed to be his natural language. Walpole concludes that the Count was, quote, a man of quality who had been in or designed for the church. He was too great a musician not to have been famous if he had not been a gentleman. Walpole described the Count as a pale with, quote, extremely black hair and beard. He dressed magnificently and had several jewels, quote, and was clearly receiving large remittance, but made no other figure. Chapter 3. France. Count Saint Germain appeared in French court around 1748. In 1749, he was employed by Louis XV for diplomatic missions. A mime and English comedian known as Me Lord Gower impersonated Saint Germain in Paris saloons. His stories were wilder than the real Count's, saying he had advised Jesus, for example. Gossip about his routine got confused with the original. Giacomo Casanova describes in his memoirs several meetings with the celebrated and learned impostor. Of his first meeting in Paris in 1757, he writes, quote, the most enjoyable dinner I had was with Madame de Robert Gourgy, who came with the famous adventurer known by the name of Count De Saint Germain. This individual, instead of eating, talked from the beginning of the meal to the end, and I followed his example in one respect, as I did not eat. but listened to him with the greatest attention. It may safely be said that as a conversationalist, he was unequal. Saint Germain gave himself out for a marvel and always aimed at exceeding amazement, which he often succeeded in doing. He was a scholar, a linguist, musician, and chemist, good-looking, and perfect ladies' man. For a while he gave them paints and cosmetics. He flattered them. Not that he would make them young again, which he modestly confessed was beyond him, but that their beauty would be preserved by means of wash which, he said, cost him much money, but which he gave away freely. He had contrived to gain the favor of Madame de Pompadour, who had spoken about him to the king, for whom he had made a laboratory, in which the monarch and martyr to boredom tried to find a little pleasure or distraction, at all events by making dyes. The king had given him a suite of rooms at Chambord and 100,000 francs for the construction of a laboratory, and according to Saint Germain, the dyes discovered by the king would have materially beneficial influences on the quality of French fabrics. This extraordinary man, intended by nature to be the king of impostors and quacks, would say in an easy, unassured manner that he was 300 years old, and that he knew the secret of universal medicine, that he possessed a mastery over nature, that he could melt diamonds, professing himself capable of forming out of 10 or 12 small diamonds one large one of the finest water without any loss of weight. All this, he said, was a mere trifle to him. Notwithstanding his boasting, his barefaced lies, and his manifold eccentrics, I cannot say I thought him offensive. In spite of my knowledge of what he was, and in spite of my own feelings, I thought him an outstanding man, as he was always astonishing me. Chapter 4. Dutch Republic. In March 1760, at the height of the 7 Years' War, Saint Germain traveled to Hague in Amsterdam. He stayed at the bankers Adrian and Thomas Hope and pretended he came to borrow money for Louis XV with diamonds as collateral. He assisted Bertrand Philip, Count of Gronsfeld, starting a porcelain factory in Weissip as a furnace and color specialist. Saint Germain tried to open peace negotiations between Britain and France with the help of Duke Louis Ernest of Bromwitz-Lumberg. British diplomats concluded that Saint Germain had the backing of Duke de Belle-Isle and possibly Madame de Pompadour, who was trying to outmaneuver the French foreign minister, the pro-Austrian Duc de Choiseul. However, Britain would not treat Saint Germain unless his credentials directly came from the French king. The Duc de Choiseul convinced Louis XV to disavow Saint Germain and demand his arrest. Count Benedict de Rohan, a Dutch diplomat, regarding the arrest warrant as internal French politicking in which Holland should not involve itself. However, a direct refusal to extradite Saint Germain was considered impolitic. De Rohan, therefore, facilitated the departure of Saint Germain to England with a passport issued by the British ambassador, General Joseph York. This passport was made out in blank, allowing Saint Germain to travel in May 1760 from Helvoetsluis to London under the assumed name, showing that this practice was officially accepted at the time. Chapter 5. The Myth. Some say he was alive in the time of Jesus and attended the wedding at
Cana, where the young Jesus turned water into wine. He was also said to be present at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Saint Germain became accomplished in the art of alchemy, the mythical science that strives to control the elements. The foremost goal of his practice was the creation of projection powder, or the elusive philosopher's stone, which it was claimed was added to the molten from such a base metal as lead. It could turn them into pure silver or gold. Furthermore, the magical power could be used in an elixir that would impart immortality to those who drank it. Count De Saint Germain, it is believed, discovered the secret of alchemy. Chapter 6. Europe. Saint Germain first came into prominence in the high society of Europe in 1742. He had just spent 5 years in the Sahat of Persia's court, where he had learned the jeweler's craft. He attracted the royals and the rich with his vast knowledge of science and history, his musical ability, his charm, and his quick wit. He spoke many languages fluently, including French, German, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, and English, and was further familiar with Chinese, Latin, and Arabic, even ancient Greek and Sanskrit. It might have been his extraordinary learnness that led acquaintances to see that he was a remarkable man. Still, an anecdote from 1760 most likely gave rise to the notion that Saint Germain could be immortal. In Paris that year, Countess von Georgery heard that a Count De Saint Germain had arrived for a soiree at the home of Madame de Pompadour, mistress of King Louis XV of France. The elderly countess was curious because she had known a Count De Saint Germain while in Venice in 1710. Upon meeting the Count again, she was astonished to see that he hadn't appeared to age, and asked him if it was his father she knew in Venice. Quote, "No, madame," he replied. Quote, "I myself was living in Venice at the end of the last and the beginning of this century. I had the honor to pay your court then." Astonished by this accusation, she would go on to say, quote, "Forgive me, but that is impossible." The perplexed countess said, quote, "The Count De Saint Germain I knew in those days was at least 45 years old, and you, on the outside, are that age at present." "Madame, I am very old," he said with a knowing smile. "But then you must nearly be 100 years old," said the astonished countess. "That is not impossible," the count told her with a matter-of-factly, then continued to convince the countess that he was indeed the same man she knew, with the details of their previous meeting in the life in Venice 50 years earlier. Chapter 7. Never Aging. Saint Germain traveled extensively throughout Europe over the next 40 years, and all that time he never seemed to age. Those who met him were impressed by his abilities and his peculiarities. He could play the violin like a virtuoso. He was an accomplished painter. Whenever he traveled, he set up an elaborate library, presumably for his alchemy work. He seemed to be the man of great wealth, but was not known to have any bank accounts. It was due to his ability to transmute base metals into gold. He never performed a great feat for observers. He often dined with friends because he enjoyed the company, but was rarely seen eating food in public. He subsisted, it was said, on a diet of oatmeal. He prescribed recipes for the removal of facial wrinkles and for dyeing hair. He loved jewels, and much of his clothing, including his shoes, were studded with them. He had perfected the technique for painting jewels. He claimed to be able to fuse several small diamonds into one large one. He also said he could make pearls grow to incredible sizes. He has been linked to several secret societies, including the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Society of Autistic Brothers, Knights of the Light, the Illuminati, and the Order of the Templars. The renowned 18th century philosopher Voltaire himself, a respected man of science and reason, said of Saint Germain that he is, quote, a man who never dies and who knows everything. Throughout the 18th century, Count De Saint Germain continued to use his seemingly endless knowledge of the world and the politics and social intricacies of European elites. In the 1740s, he became a trusted diplomat in the court of King Louis XV of France, performing secret missions for him in England. In 1760, he performed a similar function at The Hague, where he met the infamous lover Giacomo Girolamo Casanova. Casanova later said of Saint Germain, quote, this extraordinary man would say in an easy, unassured manner that he was 300 years old, that he knew all the secrets of universal medicine, that he possessed a mastery over nature, that he could melt diamonds. All this, he said, was a mere trifle to him. In 1762, he traveled to Russia, where it was said he complicitated in a conspiracy that placed Catherine the Great on the throne. He later advised the commander of the Imperial Russian armies in the war against Turkey, which they won. In 1774, he returned to France when Louis XVII and Marie Antoinette occupied the throne. He allegedly warned them of a revolution that was coming 15 years in the future. In 1779, he went to Hamburg, Germany, where he befriended Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel for the next 5 years. He lived as a guest in the prince's castle at Edenford, according to local records that is where Saint Germain died on February 27, 1784. Chapter 8, Back from the Dead. Count De Saint Germain continues to be seen throughout the 19th century into the 20th century. In 1785, he was seen in Germany with Anton Mesmer, the pioneer hypnotist. Some claim that it was Saint Germain who gave Mesmer the basic ideas of hypnotism and personal magnetism. After the taking of the Bastille in France Revolution in 1789, the Countess de Adhemir said she had lengthy conversations with Count de Saint Germain. He allegedly told her of France's intimate future as if he knew what was to come. In 1821, she wrote, quote, I have seen Saint Germain again. Each time, to my amazement, I saw him when the Queen Antoinette was murdered on the 18th of Balmer, on the day following the death of Duke Edingen in January 1815, and on the eve of the murder of Duke de Berry. The last time she saw him in 1820, and each time he looked to be a man no older than his mid-40s. After 1821, Saint Germain may have taken on another identity. In his memoirs, Albert Vandam wrote of a meeting of a man who bore a striking resemblance to Count de Saint Germain, but who went by the name of Mayer Fraser. Vandam wrote, he called himself Mayer Fraser, lived alone, and never alluded to his family. Moreover, he was lavish with money, though the source of his fortune remained a mystery to everyone. He possessed a marvelous knowledge of all countries in Europe at all periods. His memory was absolutely incredible, and curiously enough, he often gave his hearers to the understanding that he had acquired his learning elsewhere rather than from books. Many in this time he has told me, with a strange smile, that he was certain he had known Nero and had spoken to Dante, and so on. Mayer Fraser disappeared without a trace. Between 1880 and 1900, Saint Germain's name once again became prominent when members of the Theosophical Society, including famed mystic Helena Blavatsky, claimed that he was still alive and working towards the spiritual development of the West. There is even an allegedly genuine photo taken of Blavatsky and Saint Germain together. And in 1897, the famous French singer Emma Calve dedicated an autographed portrait of herself to Saint Germain. The most recent appearance of a man claiming to be Saint Germain was in 1972 in Paris, when a man named Richard Chamfray announced he was the legendary Count. He appeared on French television and, to prove his claim, apparently turned lead into gold on a camp stove before the cameras. Chamfray later committed suicide in 1983. So, who was Count Saint Germain? Was he a successful alchemist who found the secret of eternal life? Was he a time traveler? Or was he a highly intelligent man whose representation became a fantastic legend? Chapter 9, My Thoughts. For me, Count De Saint Germain is an interesting character throughout history. There's several accounts of him well into the 20th century. At the same time, a lot of these people that spoke about him also said other things that led to him being an imposter. We know through a lot of research that the possibility of immortals being amongst us is very real. So, could there very well be a real Count De Saint Germain running around us? Some aspects will tell you that he was a wandering Jew and was cursed by Christ when Christ was carrying the cross and fell to rest. And he told Christ, get up, there's no time to rest. Where Christ looked at him and said, soon I will rest, but you will never rest until I return. Could this be the lure to his immortality? Very well possible. Another aspect of it, could it be people that knew of Saint Germain and started to pretend to be him throughout different time frames? All these are very good possibilities. With all the stuff in pop culture and in history and all that stuff, with the man of Saint Germain popping up in so many places, I believe it's very possible he could be a immortal. But I cannot 100% say that he is. I can just say it's a good possibility. Let me know what you guys think in the comments on Saint Germain, and I hope you enjoyed this.